Let me ask you something. What would you do if a man walked into the restaurant where you were eating, insulted you in front of everyone, and then leaned over your plate and spit in your food? Most people would lose their temper. Some would throw punches, others might stand up and leave. But in Harlem, in 1948, one man responded in a way so calm, so calculated, so unforgettable, that the story didn't become gossip. It became instruction. No gunshots, no yelling, no chaos. Just 4 minutes and 36 permanent scars. Tonight on Bumpy Johnson Decoding Dark History, I'm telling you the story of the night Bumpy Johnson turned a simple dinner into one of the most feared lessons in Harlem history. This isn't just about violence. This is about respect, power, and what happens when someone crosses the wrong man, in the wrong place, at the worst possible moment. Let's go back to Harlem, March 23rd, 1948. Before we get into what happened that night, you need to understand who Bumpy Johnson really was. Not the TV version, not the movie version, the real man. Ellsworth, Bumpy Johnson, wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy. He didn't walk around trying to prove anything. What made him dangerous wasn't rage, it was control. By the 1930s and 40s, Bumpy had become the most powerful black criminal figure in Harlem. He wasn't just running numbers. He wasn't just collecting money. He was maintaining order in a neighborhood where the police didn't protect people, and often made things worse. People forget something about Harlem back then. If you were robbed, if you were threatened, if someone hurt you, calling the police usually made things worse, not better. So Harlem developed its own system, and at the center of that system was Bumpy Johnson. He handled disputes, he enforced boundaries, he punished violations, not because he loved violence, but because order required consequences, and everybody knew something important. Bumpy Johnson wasn't emotional. He wasn't impulsive. If he moved against you, it meant you had already crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Which brings us to Wells Restaurant. Wells Restaurant sat on 7th Avenue between 132nd and 133rd Streets, right in the heart of Harlem. It wasn't fancy, but it was important. The food was good, the coffee was strong, but the real value wasn't what was on the menu. It was discretion. People talked business there. People handled disputes there. People met there without worrying about police, snitches, or outsiders listening in. Marcus Wells, the owner, ran his restaurant on one rule. What happens in Wells stays in Wells. Bumpy Johnson ate there 3 or 4 times a week, always the same booth, back to the wall. Clear view of both entrances, not paranoia, professional survival. And on Tuesday, March 23rd, 1948, everything started like any other night. Now let's talk about the other man in this story, Ulysses Rollins. Rollins was 34 years old, originally from Georgia, living in Harlem since the early 1940s. He wasn't powerful, he wasn't wealthy, he wasn't respected, but he wanted to be. That's what made him dangerous, to himself. Rollins worked small jobs in Harlem's underground economy, numbers running, enforcement, minor operations, nothing major, nothing impressive. But he watched men like Bumpy Johnson command respect just by walking into a room, and that ate at him. Every time someone stood up when Bumpy walked in, every time people lowered their voices, every time someone called Bumpy "Sir," Rollins felt invisible, and instead of building something, he decided to challenge something. By March 1948, Rollins was working for Curtis Williams, a mid-level operator who had a business relationship with Bumpy. Not friendly, not hostile, just professional. Territories were respected. Lines weren't crossed. Except Rollins didn't understand strategy. He wanted recognition. He wanted reputation. And when he saw Bumpy Johnson sitting alone at Wells' restaurant that evening, something in his mind snapped. He thought, this is my moment. Tuesday, March 23rd, 1948, 7:30 p.m. Bumpy Johnson walked into Wells wearing a grey tailored suit. Clean, sharp, but not flashy. He ordered his usual roast chicken, collard greens, cornbread, coffee. He sat in his corner booth, unfolded his newspaper, and started reading about Truman's latest policies and rising tensions overseas. The restaurant was calm. 36 people inside, couples eating dinner, workers ending their shifts. Quiet business conversations, normal, unremarkable, until the door opened and Ulysses Rollins walked in. He saw Bumpy immediately, And instead of minding his business, instead of walking past, instead of thinking this through, Rollins walked straight toward him. No hesitation, no respect, no caution, just ego. 7:42 p.m. Rollins stopped at Bumpy's table. Didn't ask to sit, didn't greet him, just stood there. Bumpy looked up from his newspaper and recognized him instantly. He knew who he worked for. He knew his reputation. Too much mouth, not enough sense. "Rollins," Bumpy said calmly. That was it. Rollins smiled, loud, performative. "Bumpy Johnson," he said, raising his voice so nearby tables could hear. "You really walk around Harlem like you own the place, don't you?" Conversations started slowing. People noticed. Bumpy folded his newspaper carefully. "I don't own anything," he said. "I conduct my business. If you have something to discuss, come see me tomorrow. I'm eating." Rollins laughed. Big laugh. The kind meant to draw attention. "You're always eating, sitting here like nobody can touch you, like you don't got to worry about people who might challenge you." Now the room was quiet, not silent, but tense. Bumpy looked up at him. "Rollins, you're making a scene. Whatever you think you're doing, this isn't the way. Walk away." But Rollins wasn't here to walk away. He leaned closer. "I'm tired of people like you acting untouchable." And then, he did the one thing no man in Harlem was ever supposed to do. He leaned forward and spit directly into Bumpy Johnson's food. On purpose. In public. In front of 36 witnesses. The restaurant went dead silent. You could hear forks stop mid-air. Coffee cups freeze. People held their breath. And for the first time that night, Bumpy Johnson's face changed. Not anger. Not rage. Something worse. Cold calculation. Bumpy sat still for about 3 seconds, looked at his plate, looked at Rollins, then said quietly, "You should leave now, while you still can." Rollins laughed nervously. "Or what? What are you gonna do, old man?" Bumpy stood up slowly and reached into his jacket. Rollins stiffened, expecting a gun. But Bumpy pulled out something else, a straight razor, the kind barbers use, the kind men carried for practical reasons, and sometimes for others. He unfolded it calmly. "We're going outside," Bumpy said. "You wanted attention. Now everybody's going to watch." Rollins backed away. "Wait, we can talk about this." "Too late. You made your choice when you spit in my food." Bumpy walked forward. Not rushing, not aggressive, just walking. Rollins backed toward the door. The entire restaurant watched in silence. Marcus Wells didn't intervene. No one did. Everyone understood something bigger than a fight was happening. Outside, 7:45 p.m. Still light out. March evenings stayed bright. People on the street saw them immediately. Rollins tried one last time. "Bumpy, listen. I was out of line. I apologize." Bumpy said calmly, "Yes, you were out of line. And yes, we're settling this. Just not the way you want." Then he moved. Fast. Precise. The first strike took Rollins's left eye. Not a slash. A calculated cut that destroyed it instantly. Rollins screamed, hands flew to his face, and that's when Bumpy went to work. Second mark, forearm, third, shoulder, fourth, chest, fifth, other arm. Not wild, not emotional, methodical, deliberate. Each cut placed to scar, to last, to be remembered. "You wanted attention," Bumpy said calmly while cutting. "Everybody's watching now." Sixth, seventh, eighth. Rollins collapsed to his knees. Face ruined, eye gone, screaming without sound. Ninth, back, 10th, leg, 11th, 12th, 13th. Rapid succession. People on the street froze. No one intervened. Inside the restaurant, all 36 people watched through the windows. Some wanted to look away. None did. 14th, 15th, 16th. Bumpy paused. "You understand now?" he said. "You understand what it costs to disrespect someone publicly?" Rollins couldn't speak. 17th, 18th, 19th. By 20, Rollins was barely conscious. By 30, he was broken. 31st, 32nd, 33rd, 34th. Rollins collapsed flat onto the sidewalk. Then Bumpy delivered the 35th mark, across Rollins' face from forehead to chin, cutting through the destroyed eye socket, permanent, unmistakable. Then the 36th and final mark, across his throat, not deep enough to kill, just deep enough to remind. Then Bumpy stopped, folded the razor, put it back in his jacket, looked down at Rollins. No satisfaction, no anger, just completion. He turned to the crowd. "This man disrespected me publicly," Bumpy said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "He spit in my food, in front of witnesses. This is what happens when you forget respect has consequences. Remember what you saw." Then he walked back into Wells' restaurant, sat at his table, looked at Marcus Wells, and said calmly, "My meal was contaminated. I'd like fresh food, same order, and clean silverware." 7:52 p.m. Someone, nobody ever admitted who, called for medical help. The ambulance arrived around 8:15. They found Rollins lying on the sidewalk, barely conscious, bleeding heavily. Doctors later documented 36 distinct wounds, left eye destroyed beyond repair, severe blood loss, extreme shock. Police arrived at Wells' restaurant shortly after. They spoke to Marcus Wells first. "What happened here?" "A man fell outside," Wells said. "Clumsy, unfortunate." They interviewed every person inside, all 36 witnesses, and every single one said the same thing. "I didn't see anything. I was eating. I heard something but didn't look up. I don't know what happened." 36 witnesses, zero cooperation. One officer finally asked Wells directly, "Was Bumpy Johnson involved?" Wells looked confused. "Bumpy Johnson was here having dinner. Same as always. If something happened outside, I don't see how that concerns him." The police understood immediately. They had nothing. No statements. No evidence. No victim cooperation. 3 days later, the case was closed. Rollins spent 3 weeks in Harlem hospital. The first week, doctors weren't sure he'd survive. His destroyed eye had to be removed completely. 36 wounds were cleaned, stitched, bandaged. Every one of them would scar permanently. Police questioned him once he was conscious. "Who did this to you?" Rollins stared at them with his remaining eye. "I fell." "You didn't fall. Someone attacked you with a blade." "I fell." They tried again. "We can protect you." Rollins understood something they didn't. No protection mattered if he talked. "That's my statement," he said. "I fell." Eventually, police stopped trying. Curtis Williams, Rollins's boss, visited him. "Why would you confront Bumpy Johnson?" Williams asked. "Why would you do that?" Rollins whispered. "I thought I could prove something. And now I understand some men can't be challenged." Williams nodded. "Bumpy contacted me, said what happened between you and him doesn't affect business, me as long as my people understand the lesson." "What lesson?" Rollins asked bitterly. "That respect isn't something you take," Williams said. "It's something you earn." Rollins was released April 15, 1948. He left Harlem the next day, never returned. Over the years, people claimed to see him in Philadelphia, Baltimore, Atlanta, always alone, always working small jobs, always wearing an eye patch, always covering his arms, always refusing to talk about his past. He died sometime in the late 60s or early 70s. No obituary, no record, just scars. Years later, people close to Bumpy asked him about that night. Why so extreme? Why 36 marks? Why the eye? Bumpy said, "Rollins thought this was personal. Him and me. He didn't understand respect is structural. If I let a man spit in my food publicly and walk away, within a week I'd face 10 more challenges. Authority that doesn't enforce boundaries isn't authority. It's weakness." The 36 marks weren't random. One for each witness. One reminder for each person who saw him disrespect me. And the eye? He wanted everyone to see him challenge me, so I made sure everyone who ever looked at him saw what happened when that challenge failed. Not revenge, maintenance, not emotion, structure. The confrontation lasted 4 minutes. The lesson lasted 50 years. In Harlem, people didn't say, "Don't disrespect Bumpy." They said, "Remember the 36. Parents told kids, older men told young men, business people told newcomers. Not as a threat, as a warning, because in Harlem, respect wasn't abstract, it was enforced. And Ulysses Rollins learned, the hardest way possible, that some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. This wasn't about brutality. It was about power. It was about boundaries. It was about survival in a world where official law offered no protection. And whether you see Bumpy Johnson as a criminal, or a king, or something in between. One thing is undeniable. On March 23, 1948, in front of 36 witnesses, at Wells' restaurant, Bumpy Johnson taught Harlem a lesson nobody forgot. And that is dark history decoded.